is going to be a fun conversation today.
Yeah, interesting times for sure. Interesting times for sure. Yeah.
What I love is you're always great about making predictions, like making them right now with all the 5,000 different variables that are going into what's happening right now. It's like,
yeah. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we can make predictions, but it probably, the overall time period for which it may be valid is probably about a week or lesser. So I think the prediction time frame has come down quite dramatically given all that's going on. Yeah.
So I think I'm just letting everybody know. They can drop questions in the chat. So let's go ahead and kick it off. Happy Tuesday, everybody. My name's Aaron Conant. I'm the co-founder, managing director here at BWG Connect. We're a networking and knowledge sharing group of thousands of brands. We do exactly that. We network and knowledge share together to stay on top of the newest trends, strategies, pain points, whatever it might be. We just crossed the 5-year mark now. So have over 8,000, probably pretty close to 9,000 brands in the network now that participate. So thanks to everybody who sends in topics and makes recommendations across the board. I spend a lot of my time talking with brands to stay on top of those trends. And when the same topics come up over and over again, that's how we get topics for anything that we do. For these virtual events, we're going to do close to 100 in-person dinners this year, 4 to 5 full day in-person events in New York City. And then some random happy hours, just where we all get to hang out and network together. We launched a podcast earlier this year. If you'd like to catch up on any of these strategies on a weekly basis, we bring in top people like Udayan and other people, industry leaders that come recommended to tackle those biggest topics. Try to make it, consumable in 30 minutes or less. So check that out. I put it in the chat. The other thing is we're getting started here 3 to 4 minutes after the hour. We're going to wrap up with 3 to 4 minutes to go. And the last thing is we want it to be as educational and informational as possible. So at any point in time, you have questions or comments, drop into the chat. You can even drop into the Q&A if you want, if there's a Q&A section there, and we can tackle those as we go. And with that, I'm going to kick off. This is something that we do on a quarterly basis, right? With Udayan as a whole for a while now. I think ever since the pandemic kicked off.
Yeah. And almost 3 years now, 2.5. Yeah, 2.5.
Yeah, and you've been hanging in there as everything's been changing. But this is the 2022 e-commerce trends as a whole, as we kind of come out of Q2, what's going to happen in Q3, looking into Q4, what we're seeing so far. But again, everybody, Udayan's been a great friend, partner, supporter of the network. It's an awesome company called NetElixir that's helping a ton of brands out in it. Top Google partner, UPS partner. They're just all around fantastic people and just a wealth of knowledge. So Udayan, I'll kick it over to you if you want to do an intro on yourself and NetElixir. That'd be awesome. And then we can kind of jump into the conversation. I know there's a slide deck here, and then we'll try to keep it conversational as we go through the slides. Sound good?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Aaron, for a very kind and generous
introduction. You're a great friend, mate. Yeah, don't mind it at all. Yep.
I just want to take you through the trends, but before I even start off, Aaron, let me confess that we have been doing this presentation every quarter. We used to sort of do it every month in 2020 when COVID hit. But this was the one which took me the most time. When I say me, I'm talking about the entire analyst group and us as we were discussing, because there have been so many variables and so much ups and downs over the last, let us say, 7 or 8 months of this year, that it really was extremely difficult to really get a strong grasp on what are those trends that we all should be focused on, and what are the trends which probably are not very relevant for the purpose, at least, of this communication. So before I jump in, a quick introduction about our company, and before that, quickly an agenda as to what I was hoping to cover today, Aaron. A quick introduction about the company. I'll share with you some of the key e-commerce and consumer trends from the last couple of years, which have been very eventful for multiple reasons. Most importantly, it has been terrible years from the perspective of humanity. And I think as we saw in 2022, the world emerging from the pandemic, there have been brand new challenges and struggles that really have emerged, which continue in many cases. I'll also be sharing 2022, some of the trends and insights as well. And then we'll sort of wrap up with 5 recommendations for e-commerce marketers getting into the holiday season. Believe it or not, we are just about a month away from the holidays, essentially holiday season. We are expecting a slightly early start given the quantum of inventory which is lying there, Aaron. So we are pretty much about a month away from the holiday season. These recommendations are based on a lot of the real-time data analysis that is being done by the NetElixir Retail Intelligence Lab. So before I even start off with the introduction, I have to thank all these folks for their tremendous work in providing me all the data. Our data is pretty fresh that I'm going to be sharing today. We have taken all the key e-commerce metrics at the category level up to the 20th of August. So it's as fresh as you can possibly get from any source as well. And as Aaron mentioned, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to add to the Q&A box. I have requested, again, the same request as Aaron, that let us keep it conversational, and because we are all trying to figure it out together. I think that's the tone. A little bit about the company. We have been around for over 18 years now. We are one of the fastest growing independent digital marketing agencies currently in North America. And what we do is we help e-commerce brands find and engage high-value shoppers and acquire game-changing insights. But let me again emphasize that acquiring these game-changing insights, despite really having our own technology, having those business models, has proven to be extremely difficult when given the number of variables have multiplied, specifically over the last few months. We offer a wide range of solutions on digital marketing, starting from helping you with your digital marketing strategy, managing your paid search, social, SEO, Amazon, do a huge amount of analytics consulting. We do a fair amount of e-commerce or web development and provide also content marketing and creative services. We are a Google Leadership Circle member. We are one of the top 12 independent agencies in North America for Google, which has this privilege of being a part of the group called the Google Leadership Circle. And of course, a Google Premier partner. We are also very privileged to be a UPS Ready partner and a Microsoft partner, Meta partner, and very recently a TikTok special partner and an Amazon partner as well. Work with a fairly wide range of clients, a little over 120 customers currently, mostly in the retail and the direct-to-consumer business. All of them are e-commerce. Have been around, as I mentioned, 18 plus years. I'll just quickly go through this. Been very privileged to get an opportunity to work with over 600 e-commerce companies over the last 18 years and be a small part in terms of contributing to their growth story. A big driver or a secret sauce is an AI-powered digital marketing platform, which helps us to identify those high-value audiences that we can really then populate and utilize the different marketing channels, whether it is Google ads or Facebook ads, to target these high-value audiences, thereby multiplying the return on investment we are able to get for every marketing dollar by as much as about 3 to 5 times. Have over 13 years of international search marketing experience working with companies like Lenovo. We have now built campaigns, Aaron, for marketers in about 115 countries. And last but not the least, as I mentioned earlier, we are a member of the Google Leadership Council. This is a group of the top 12 independent agencies in North America. And we have access to the new alphas coming up from Google and a lot of the thought leadership directly with the Google exec leadership team as well. A little about me. I mean, I founded NetElixir in 2004. I am very privileged to be an innovation fellow at the Columbia Business School's Lang Center of Entrepreneurship. I am also very passionate about teaching and research and sharing knowledge. Very privileged to be a part of more of a guest faculty for the Johnson School of Management at Cornell, CUNY Baruch, and the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad as well. Let me dive directly into the e-commerce trends. Again, the request I would have is there is a lot of content which I'm going to be sharing, a lot of the insights, a lot of trends that I'm going to be sharing with all of you. Some of these trends, I'm pretty sure you are all experiencing as e-commerce marketers. Others may stand out as something which you may not have spent as much time thinking about as much. So the aspiration is, if at the end of the presentation, you are able to walk away with maybe about 2 or 3 key takeaways, which really helps you to be a little more prepared for this holiday season, which both Aaron and I feel would be one of the more unpredictable ones that we have really experienced in the last many years now. we would really consider this presentation to be successful. So please, again, let us keep it conversational and let me dive into the e-commerce trends that we have seen. These are the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021. I'm pretty sure many of you would have seen this graph, right? We saw about 10 years of growth in 3 months. Net, when we really analyze these 2 years, what was the actual growth? Based on our analysis, we felt that e-commerce growth may have leapfrogged by about 2+ years during the pandemic. It's a fairly wide range between 1.5 years to 2.5 years. And during this time, e-commerce, which accounted for, again, per the overall retail census data, accounted for about 14% pre-pandemic sales, now accounts for about 18 to 20% of the total retail sales. So fundamentally, there was a shift. There has been a shift. There has been an acceleration. One of the very interesting stats which we saw during this period, 2020 and 2021, we saw a little over 7 million first-time online shoppers. And in my opinion, that's one of the most important stats to keep in mind, because many of these shoppers continue to purchase still online. And many of them have gone back to purchasing almost entirely offline as well. And also, very interestingly and importantly, many of these shoppers were baby boomers who had never, ever made a purchase online prior to the pandemic. So one of the things for sure that we can say as a trend is, once you really have been able to break that initial barrier to really adopting or really trying out online shopping, it obviously ceases to be as difficult moving forward. And I think this would be a pretty important trend to keep in mind for every business as in the many months and years to come. We also saw that after the vaccinations and shopper started returning to physical, many of the first-time online shoppers continued to shop online as well. In fact, we had done this survey, and I think I had presented it almost exactly a year back, along with Aaron, that we saw about 17% in categories like beauty and apparel. These new shoppers continue to shop online, 17%. We have not done a recent check, but I would not be very surprised if still the number is anywhere between about 12 to 17% still of those new shoppers who have continued to shop online, even in 2022.
I think it's also interesting that it's 2 years, because if you remember, this is the retrospective, when you normalize all the numbers looking back. I mean, originally it was, hey, it's leap year. It's jumped 5 years. It's jumped 8 years. It's jumped 10 years.
Yeah.
But you're looking back, it's like, hey, the actual normalized number is 1.5 to 2.5. So an average of 2 years. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's just a new number that
right.
I think.
And I think the key trend, though, I would sort of again emphasize to keep in mind, Aaron, is that the first time online shoppers. And the reason I sort of wanted to emphasize that, because I feel there is an opportunity for many businesses still. I mean, I think there has been a lot of reduction in terms of the shopping experience friction, but I think marketers can do more to reduce the friction that these still fairly new to online shoppers experience while engaging with their business. And we are seeing some marketers do exceptionally well. There have been some innovations. I'll talk about one trend that's really having a perceptible impact in terms of overall online sales. But I think that would be one of the focus areas I would definitely want to highlight. How exactly are you engaging your new shoppers? When I say new, the folks who really sort of joined and started buying from your site only during COVID or later.
Awesome.
I wanted to share also some overall consumer research, which happened last year, essentially, YouGov, and just to understand some of the changes in the shopping frequency during the pandemic, right? For example, I now shop much less often in person, about 28%. I now shop somewhat less in person, was about 21%. So if you add both of them, about 50% seem to be purchasing more online. But again, this data is about a year old now, almost a year old now. So some of these behavior also continues to change as well. But net, I think since we do a lot of tracking of these shoppers, we really break it down into the different audience segments. One of the things which I believe is a trend which will be there forever, I guess, is every business really needs to be omni-excellent. You have to stop talking about offline and online separately. It has to be talked about in one seamless customer journey, which straddles both online and offline touchpoints. Because one thing which COVID did was each and every purchase occasion, and I would have to emphasize each and every purchase occasion has an online touchpoint. So if nothing else, one of the trends that I feel extremely confident about, and I'm very pleased to see a lot of marketers adopting this language, they're stopping to talk about online and offline separately. And it all becomes a blended, let us talk about the customer journey, understand as to how can we really make the entire customer journey even more seamless and even more friction-free for the customers. And the marketers who are able to do it well are still winning big time. So that's one of the trends which definitely has stuck. And we believe that this is a trend which will continue forever, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, because you have the traditional, in-store retail brands that that are selling in store that are blending that with the online, right? The direct to consumer, or even, retail media, Amazon, whatever it might be. The other side is I'm talking to a lot of brands that are digitally native brands, and now they have to get in retail, right? That's like, for the last 2 years, it was like this huge emphasis around, hey, look at how amazing these direct to consumer brands are. And now it's at the point where they start to realize to continue to hit growth numbers, you actually have to get in store. And so the blend is going, traditionally, in-store brands going and adopting this blended, online, offline media strategy, and the vice versa is true as well.
Absolutely, Aaron. Absolutely. I think one good part that I really wanted to highlight of all of this stuff, the consumer is right at the center of all the strategy, right? So everyone is talking about the consumer, and there has been a tremendous leap forward, specifically during the last about 2.5 years, in terms of businesses trying to understand their consumer a lot better. So when you put consumer at the center of each and every strategy, and then really try to map out their customer journey, then suddenly the overall channel preferences that you have, et cetera, become secondary, because you are trying to really map out the customer journey, understand how to really engage with them at each and every touch point, whether it be a physical retail or online retail, in a seamless manner, in a consistent manner, and in a very responsible manner as well. So that has been, I think, one of the biggest wins, or I think the positive takeaways from this entire pandemic, that we are seeing time and again for across businesses, across categories, the consumer is right at the heart and the center of everything. So that I think is a very positive trend I really wanted to call out. It also has really led to de-averaging the consumer as well, Aaron. We are seeing very clear, I mean, if we talk about digital natives, they have a much higher buying clout, which keeps on increasing every day. Millennials exhibit a slightly different buying pattern or buying preferences. We have the baby boomers exhibiting, again, a very different track altogether, and so on. But the most encouraging part is businesses are really spending a lot of time, effort, and resources trying to understand these and identify those meaningful differences in consumer behavior. And we are seeing the entire audience segmentation, audience targeting strategies go to a very different level altogether. So we very clearly see a trend where businesses are de-averaging the consumer. I think the concept of average order value and average is entirely a flawed concept. And I think that this entire drive towards de-averaging the consumer and understanding the different consumers as much as possible, and then engaging them responsibly, is definitely one of the very positive trends which has really emerged out of it. And this is backed by data as well. For example, this was a Google survey which happened. It's about, again, a year old now. But we saw that during this COVID, the gap between the baby boomers in terms of their online reachability versus the Gen Z got narrowed quite substantially as well. So that's, I think, a very positive trend. We are seeing a trend which I would say is, which I think we should not really undermine the impact of COVID there, which we call it the COVID lift or boom, is just a little bit of a homogenization of the entire part. So it basically, there was a bit of a cross spread whereby people were much more comfortable really being online and sort of browsing, buying, shopping, experiencing online as such, which I think COVID there had a massive impact on that piece entirely. We also saw during the same time, very interestingly, some of the marketers very consciously and purposefully really questioned their strategy as well. For example, I was talking to a very large grocery chain. They are actually the second largest in North America. And I was talking to their the chief merchandising officer. And essentially, we were talking about essentially as to how their entire product mix has changed, or the entire product mix has changed, and so on and so forth. And one of the things he mentioned is, he said that there are perceptible differences in terms of how an high-value customer is really shopping, but how an average customer is here. Tell me more. So high-value customer, he said that there is a small sliver of customer, maybe about 8 to 10%, who are driving a big chunk. They are making their average shopping cart size is much bigger. But then when you sort of dive in and really break it down into Gen Z, Millennials, Baby Boomers, Gen X, and so on and so forth, you would see certain unique trends emerge. And for their grocery chain, they had seen such a unique trend emerge as well. And they were utilizing that insight, that not only that high value and the average customer separation, so focusing more on the high value customers, but breaking it down into the demographic bits, and then really try to even test out different localized promotions specifically targeted at each of these finer units or micro segments almost of audiences. A very interesting concept. And obviously this was possible because they were able to blend in their offline and the online data. They could track their, they have about 9,000 stores currently, grocery stores, and they were able to track and measure the combined impact and the lift just through these shifting and changing and testing out their promotional, very targeted promotional strategies as well. So for example, what we are seeing as well, some of these overall numbers, we are pretty big in terms of using our data platform. We have this AI-powered platform called Elixir Insights, which enables us to filter out the high-value audiences and really present these high-value audiences and target them directly through Google and Facebook ads and so on and so forth. So we are seeing some very perceptible changes. One, as you can see in this case, this is for a typical cosmetics shopper. While the average customer spent about $139 in their lifetime, that was a lifetime spend, the high value customer spent almost about 2.5, 3 times more, right? And their overall number of orders per customer placed during this, let us say about last 12 months was about 3. They were visiting the website a lot more. So the question is, if the high value customers can be separated out, and if marketing strategies can be pinpointed towards engaging these high value customers a lot more, what would that mean for your entire marketing strategy? What would you do differently to target these folks separately? If, as I think data is very clearly confirming that if done right, you can really increase the return on your marketing spend as much as about 3 times in this case, for example, right? So they are visiting your site more number of times. What is the unique experience you'll sort of offer to them? What is their overall, the 4P messaging that you will do? What does the high value customer purchase in terms of the product merchandise, and how will that really impact your merchandising strategy? How will you really go ahead and remarket to these folks and so on? So if there was one takeaway I would have, and I'm sort of repeating that later as well, by saying that the concept of the average consumer is really a myth. I mean, there is no average consumer. I mean, tell me, I mean, we have a pretty big audience join this presentation. How many of you considered yourself as an average shopper? I'm pretty sure no one does, right? But why don't we really put as much emphasis on trying to understand our higher value shoppers a little more and really market to them a little more responsibly? So that's the concept which really became very prominent during the COVID times, because this was the time, and Aaron, we were talking about retail media. Incidentally, that's my next trend, which was there.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking from this standpoint, like this is what separates the good from the great, is this strategy right here, right? It's the difference between spending money in paid media on everybody who hits your site, and or being able to spend money in paid media and personalization around who you've identified as your high value customers.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, the next one is how do you identify the high value customers?
Mhm.
And
So
then
that is
pour into
exactly
that.
what it is, and this got extremely amplified during the last 2 years, because if you note the specifically during the COVID trends, there was an intense amount of competition. So overall, I think the first 3-4 months the spend was pretty less, but then everyone understood and acknowledged the value and the importance of online, and we saw a tremendous spike in the overall advertising spends between, let us say, the Q3 or Q2, more likely Q3 of 2020, all the way till about holidays of 2021. And at that point in time, it was just a crazy rush. People are just throwing the budgets. But we saw also during that time, and we were able to validate it for many of our customers using Elixir Insights, the AI-powered platform that we run, that by really targeting your higher value customers, you can actually make a massive dent in your return on investment. You can really sort of get a lot more, right? Rather than chasing an average customer who anyway probably will not really come back and buy from you again after buying once. And 70% of the online shoppers actually across retail categories buy only once from the website. Still, people really keep on chasing the average customer. So this got some of the sophisticated and advanced marketers really sort of latched onto this, and they really benefited tremendously. And they were able to grow their in-house database, the customer base or the customer file, in a much smarter manner and a much more data-driven manner. So that was a trend. I think the concept of the average consumer got completely broken or shattered during these last 2.5 years, essentially.
I mean, it begs a couple of questions too, which we might get to with the, Google and third-party cookies and identifying it in Google Analytics 4 and Performance Max campaigns, everything is coming out. But also the fact that, I think, as marketers, a lot of money was thrown at us to go just make digital happen. And you could, for a while, just pour money in and money would come out. iOS 14.5 updates. I know cookie, deprecation has gone away for, until 2024 now. But the flip side is retail media. So as marketers, all of a sudden, we're forced to be smarter with our money in the spend. We're supposed to deliver above average performance. And oh, by the way, you mentioned retail media, which I hope we get to. Every retailer now is asking for a paid media budget, right? Like, exactly. So
exactly.
You might see it trimming down, as I go to the digital marketing team and say, hey, well, how are we going to divvy up this spend, between the retailers and our direct to consumer site? I mean, it's gotten really complicated. So you have to be smarter with your money, because the other thing is, like, the CMOs now have gotten to an education level where they're looking at the metrics and they're putting metrics out there. And we've been, teaching upward for the past 2 years around, hey, what are the right KPIs? What are the right metrics to follow? And now we've got them in place. Now we're actually being, expected to keep to those metrics. So anyways, interesting.
Absolutely, Aaron. So that sort of leads me to, the third trend that we are seeing. So I think the cookie thread, the cookie crumbling, or the third-party cookie is going away. I mean, the world saw the impact, I think, for the first time on the 26th of April last year, right? When the IDFA or the iOS 14.5 happened, and suddenly we saw social media, you could no longer track back very accurately. The same happened for search as well, and so on, etc., etc. So that, I think, was the first big shock almost for the marketing community, which forced most marketers to really sit back and start considering that this is something which is coming. And once Chrome deprecates the cookie, between Chrome and Safari, it's about 85 or 86% of the overall browser market in the US, and globally probably a very similar number as well. So 85%, we are unable to really address them properly, or measurability is limited, or attribution is not possible. Then what do we do, right? So it was, I think, it was almost like a wake-up call for a lot of marketers that this is coming, let us start getting ready. And it's just happenstance, and which is probably a very positive or a lucky thing to happen, is now Chrome has really shifted the deprecation day to 2024. But marketers now have taken note of this, right? And they also have seen with the iOS 14.5 shift last year, what can really happen. So people are really trying their best to make the most of just thinking or envisioning a situation as to once we really move to a first-party cookie, how will really things shape up? And one of the trends which became pretty apparent was that once you don't really are relying entirely on the first-party cookie, the digital marketing suddenly becomes extremely fragmented. Essentially because all the channels we already have seen, and we have acknowledged the power. I think with 50% of the overall e-commerce sales in the US, you can't really say no to the power of Amazon, right? We have seen as to what happens when businesses really build their own walled gardens. Similarly, Google, I think, is trying to build their walled gardens because they don't have an option. They don't have the liberty of utilizing the third-party cookie any longer. Meta will try to do the same. And all these other circles that you see in this graphic, essentially each one of them is maybe a new walled garden which is coming up. And these walled gardens are called the retail media, which became the new battleground for growth. So we saw a massive drive and people really rushing into, and every major retailer now really wanted to have their own retail media network and so on, right? And the promise was strengthen brand building and obviously monetization. And it was also sort of moving into new ad formats like CTV and so on and so forth. But now we have almost about a year of data in terms of companies trying to build their own retail networks. I am not aware of too many who are succeeding very much. I mean, Aaron, I'm pretty sure you would have, given the number of brands and companies you talk with, I may have better lay of the land. And it's happening primarily because one is they are struggling to get a consistent flow of traffic. The second part is the monetization model still is a little unclear. And the third component, they have, I mean, we can't really ignore the fact, I mean, it's just too big to be ignored. They have been impacted by a bit of an online retail sales or purchase slowdown as well in the first 8 months or 7 months of this year so far as well. So it is becoming difficult for them to scale. Now, the operating costs are quite substantial. If you're running your retail media network, and understandably, it's a steep learning curve, and the operating costs to scale are different. It's very unique. You can obviously start. The starting cost is easy, but scale up cost is difficult. So it is really, I think, at this point in time, a lot of those businesses who may have thought about creating their own retail media network, I think are going back to the drawing board and rethinking their entire strategy as well. I mean, they are thinking whether this is attractive enough. I mean, this is an eMarketer graph which shows that the retail media ad spending is expected to cross $52 billion by next year. Whether they really want to play in this game or whether they want to select specific walled gardens, the Google walled garden or the Meta walled garden, whatever it is, right? And really focus their efforts in trying to own the different touch points or the consumer touch points through the walled garden. So it's almost like a moment of reckoning, I think, which is the first checkpoint, which is happening now as we speak. Essentially in terms of, should I have my own retail media network or am I better off selecting the walled gardens that I really want to play in? So that essentially, I think, is the third trend that I really wanted to sort of focus on as well. So this is basically getting questions that brand conglomerates and aggregators are competing to own the digital shelf. And how can you hold your own without sacrificing your profitability, I think, is a key component.
Yeah, I'll just have a quick comment to brands. So I'm talking to 20 or 30 a week, and it's, you know, within the network as a whole, it's startup to Fortune 100, it's fashion to CPG and everything in between. And nobody's figured out retail media yet. There's people working on it. I would say there's leaders in the space who are figuring out the strategy. But, you know, the amount of pressure now that is on how you perform, how the money was spent, the return on ad spend that you need to have, and the sales and conversion rate you need to drive. And because every one of these retail media networks are new outside of Amazon, and everybody's trying to figure out, how does the platform work? Do I need an agency to help me out? Do I need an ad tech tool to plug in on the back end? What is the right percent based on GMV that I should be allocating? Does it come out of the trade spend? Does it come, you know, out of traditional, you know, marketing spend? That's what everybody's trying to figure out right now. And so if you don't have it figured out, you're not behind. You're just in this massive slug as everybody's been hit by 150 new retail media partners. Hey, come spend money on us. Everybody from, you know, the Piggly Wigglies of the world to Targets and Walmart. So anyways, just wanted to have that call out for brands that are listening. And if anybody wants to have a follow-up conversation on what's going on, like shoot me an email. That's more than happy to put time on the calendar and chat with you on the retail media side for sure. Anyways, I just want to have that call out because I know there's a lot of brands right now that are scratching their head on what they should do strategy wise and what are best practices. And we're trying to figure out best practices right now.
So moving on, Aaron, I think let me go into some of the more recent ones. I'm sorry. This is some of the stuff that we have seen in the last 2 years, right? 2020 and 2021. I really wanted to call out and share some actual stats and numbers as to what we are seeing in terms of pure data, in terms of the year-on-year growth data at a category level, as well as also highlight about 5 trends which we believe are important that we have now after about 7.5 or 8 months in 2022 that have become pretty prominent as well. Before I start off, I think I wanted to share 2 of the LinkedIn post screen captures from 2 of my very good friends, Andrew from eMarketer Group or Insider Intelligence Group, and Ajit, he heads the DTC for Lenovo worldwide. And understandably, I mean, as Andrew mentions, the myth of the permanent e-commerce acceleration. So I think the question that we are all forced to ask is, was the 10 years in 10 weeks growth a gross distortion? That's what I think Andrew's question was, right? And I think the verdict is still out there. It's pretty open. But understandably, I'm pretty sure that all of you would agree when I say that, yeah, it's definitely not 10 years worth of spike. And as Aaron and I discussed, it's probably more like 1.5 to 2.5 years worth of spike, which is not bad as well. But let us understand as to what are those trends which are likely to stick. And what are some of these things as to how exactly can you really plan for the future based on these trends, which I am highlighting essentially in this presentation. So in terms of category-wise e-commerce growth, and we have really our own data set. We have been tracking this since 2008 now. And this compares H1 2022 versus H1 2021. So you see a lot of reds there, right? Understandably, there was a decline. And now H1 had an inordinate amount of impact because of a very strong Q1 2021, where the online sales still benefited from the direct COVID impact or the COVID bump as well. But we saw apparel was at about plus 7%, beauty and cosmetics plus 19%. So overall, I think this has been, this matches fairly closely. I think the overall online sales were down by about minus 7%. But it was across categories, right? So I think I wanted to highlight 2 things, right? The first thing is, I want you to look into these categories from a perspective, not only from COVID versus the post-COVID, or this is the post-COVID trends comparisons, but I also want to look at it from the perspective of some of the other variables which may be having an influence or an impact as well. We have already talked about the COVID impact. That's, I think, an inordinate online demand. If we really layer on that, maybe the importance of a supply chain challenges that has been experienced in certain categories. The third is actually the category type. There are certain essential categories. There are certain categories which are non-essential. And typically, if you have more or less a fixed wallet size, essentially the share of wallet unfortunately got skewed because of the inflationary pressures. Gas, as we know, sort of crossed that $5 mark and so on and so forth. Right, so that may have had an impact in certain parts as well. The fourth part also is there are certain categories which saw a massive jump during COVID. So are we really looking at a much more of a stretched, longer, almost like a recalibration time, whereby things settle into a much more steady state, but it takes longer to get into a state? I'll call out 2 categories specifically. One is consumer electronics, and the second is home improvement in this case. Right. I mean, specifically in 2020, we saw home improvement sales really spike. And so did hardware and tools, consumer electronics. Everyone was sort of buying their own laptops or home laptops and so on and so forth. So it'd be interesting to see or understand or probably even try to think as to how will these categories pan out in the long run. And one question that I would have for you is, as you are really comparing the year-on-year trends, is it even right to compare last year versus this year? Or maybe it's a more appropriate comparison to compare the 2019 versus now, not only in terms of overall sales, but the key metrics as well. And I'll share with you some insight that we have been able to derive there as well. But before I go there, I wanted to also share with you the last 2 months of data, or Q3, 1st of July until about 20th of August. We saw apparel, which was still clocking a plus 7%, suddenly go down to minus 2%. So there was a decline compared to last year. But again, that may be impacted because the apparel sales really went up once the vaccination started, specifically in Q2 and Q3. Specifically, we saw the apparel sales slowly sort of inch up and move up. During COVID times, that was one of the categories which saw a negative impact, specifically the outdoor apparel part. Beauty and cosmetics continues to be steady. The other categories slowly are making their way up, right? Slowly the negatives are declining. And overall, when we really consider the entire retail category data set that we are analyzing, there is still a decline of about minus 4.5%, but on a more positive tone, it's instead of minus 7.2, it has now become minus 4.5 as well. But it is still rough out there when it comes to e-commerce. Now, we keep getting asked the same question as to, based on this information, is it possible for us to forecast and predict how the remainder of the year would be? And at this point in time, my answer would be very similar to what Aaron has also highlighted. The number of variables are so many. There is a state of confusion that I'm seeing very clearly in the entire industry, which I have not seen in my last 19 years of running this company. And when you talk about, I'm talking about businesses or e-commerce companies or retailers, everyone trying to figure out and latch to some trend which they believe can be impactful or which can really help them plan better for the future. I'm also seeing, just because of a lack of clarity, a lot of conservatism or a lot of, I would think, being a little more limited and tight-fistedness sort of coming in as well. Now, probably that's the obvious reaction, specifically when there is a lack of clarity. Understandably, people become a lot more conservative as such. The question that I would sort of pose there, is there a way for us as a community to figure out these trends on a much more of a real-time basis? And can we really somehow really have a slight change in how we really operate as a business, and really are able to be a lot more nimble in terms of how we operate, therefore not really missing out on any, in many cases, very, very time-bound opportunities that may emerge as well? Because while conservatism is the normal response, there is also an opportunity for smart, data-driven marketers to grab valuable market share during this time as well. So I really wanted to call that out, and I really wanted to, again, at the cost of emphasizing it a little too much, emphasize the importance of capturing this real-time data to really define and somehow really really govern your overall business decisions, even though it may be for a shorter span. Some of the specific trends, again, calling out, the first one is pretty straightforward. So nothing surprising there. I mean, mobile phones drove about 58% across categories. They fell a little bit, 56% of online orders. They still accounted for about 64% of all the website visits, but about 56% of all the orders came from mobile phone. For fashion and beauty, mobile phones drove about 75% of all the orders. When you really move on, this is, I think, the interesting one. When we compared to H1 2019, we found that statement which Andrew made, the distortion statement, I think probably is valid, but not to that level that we didn't really gain anything, right? So we saw that each and every e-commerce metric, when you compare 2019 versus now, we are stronger now. The average website traffic is 21% higher. Website orders are about 12% higher. The website average order value is about 24%. So if you multiply the average order value with the website orders, you would see that the overall website revenue is up by almost about 30-35% as such. So based on this, Aaron, we can very safely say that the pandemic led to an impact which cannot really now be shrugged off anymore as maybe a temporary distortion. we feel that based on the data that we have been able to aggregate, the pandemic actually led to a 1.5 to 2.5 years of e-commerce growth. Again, it was very category dependent. In certain categories, it was not really as much of a lift. But in other categories, the lift was a lot more. Like grocery saw a massive lift. I would probably have to say that grocery industry, when it comes to online, really leapfrogged by about 2.5 years because of COVID. So those are the things, just to be more practical and more data-driven in terms of making those statements. One of the observable parts, and which I think is again a proof that a lot of businesses really became a lot more nimble. Most retailers have made drastic changes to their product mix. And I use that word very carefully, drastic. We have seen in certain cases, I mean, as I mentioned, we work with over 120 retail clients. At least 20% of them, the percentage of the products that we are selling now on their behalf, or let us say marketing on their behalf, is probably only about 15% are the same as what they were promoting or selling in 2019. So they have really been nimble enough to understand the consumer behavior, the consumer preferences. They obviously have been cognizant of and experienced the supply chain and inventory challenges. In fact, I was talking to Aaron, and I was there at a large home improvement retailer, one of our clients in the Midwest, about 3 weeks back. And their biggest struggle is they have about 7 months of inventory still. In many cases, we see businesses which have about year-long inventory, I mean 1 year of inventory and so on, which is obviously influencing the reorder rates and so on. And that last part also was very interesting. I mean, a lot of businesses were very open and very observant of all the changes in the competitive landscape as well. So net, what did the retailer do? They really changed their operating model to become a lot more nimble. Thankfully, became a lot more data-driven, and also really focused a lot more in terms of being relevant to the different consumer segments, as well as an inordinate focused on different SKU level margins as well. In fact, I'll share with you a simple example, again, with the same retailer I'm talking about. They're about a $500 million company. Effectively, now, I'm pretty sure many of you are running the Performance Max campaigns on Google and so on and so forth. So we have been able to model and the entire setup based on individual SKU level profitability margins. And the impact has been quite substantial. So effectively, we are also seeing advanced data-driven marketers are able to really combine their efforts when it comes to merchandising or retailing, core retailing, as well as the marketing are working hand in hand a lot more closely compared to what our observation was, let us say in 2019 pre-COVID. So maybe COVID really led to a closer interaction between the supply chain side and the marketing side, which fundamentally in the long run, I think can be of a massive competitive advantage for any company or any business moving forward. The fourth trend I really wanted to call out is we have seen the high purchase frequency categories continue to do well. The categories like grocery, I already called it out, or cosmetics continue to do well online. I think it's a combination of multiple things. One is a lot of these businesses in these categories have constantly tried to lower the purchase friction, especially in the essential category. So make it very seamless overall shopping experience. And therefore, they have been able to induce a higher level of habit formation as well. And as I think Andrew of eMarketer calls it out as well. Effectively, the habit formation, companies have really spent a lot of thought as well as utilize a lot of the consumer data to really understand as to how do they lower the entire friction and the barriers in the entire consumer journey and really induce the habit formation a lot better, let us say. And also they have been able to engage the new to online shoppers a lot better as well during the pandemic. The last trend I wanted to share is, in purely my personal opinion, I feel that BNPL may have been the most important sales catalyst during the post-pandemic times. It may have been, we have seen that the entire Klarna and Affirm, their adoption went up substantially during the last about 2.5 years. But somehow I shudder to think what would happen, because the inflation definitely is impacting the overall demand. What would have really happened had BNPL options not been there. And specifically, we also saw the emergence or the increasing buying clout of Gen Z. Millennials already had a pretty substantial buying clout, and their adoption of BNPL really made a pretty big difference, essentially, for the businesses as well. So these are 5 e-commerce trends which we feel very confident enough to really present to all of you. And the question I would ask is, how exactly will you utilize, or what is the applicability some of these trends would have on your business? And let us say in helping you really define some of your strategic plans for at least the remainder of the year. I mean, given the number of variables and the uncertainty, I mean, I think that's a fairly long time to plan for, would be my question. But let me pause there, Aaron, and if you have any questions, happy to take them now. I just have a couple of more slides, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just one was really quick. Would inflation play into the increase in AOV compared to 2019?
It is, and we sort of, that's a great question. We actually did the factoring as well, and we used 2 metrics. One was our own data set, and we also really poured into the retail, the census data that sort of published the mid of the month, the government retail data as well. So we believe that the impact of the inflation was about 13%. So an item, again, this is a very broad averaging, because in certain categories, the inflation didn't play an impact. The other categories, it had a massive impact. Specifically in food and grocery, we saw a massive impact as such. But on an average again is a bad word, I must really confess, the inflation impact was about 13%. So, but even if that probably impacted the AOV specifically in this case, but still, I think the COVID effectively led to an increase in average order value, even if you really remove the inflation part as such. But 13% is what we are seeing across the category. I mean, if you really took an average.
And the other one is just around like the recommendations, right? Which I think, you jumped to the previous slide just briefly. Like, what are you advising, the brands you're working with today? What would you tell, hey, somebody new comes in the door, like, and they say, hey, what should we do, as we go into Q3, Q4? And, that's, I think, is key takeaways here.
So I'll sort of share some of them, actually, Aaron. I sort of created and I'll try to speak and try to address this. So we have about 5 recommendations I'll sort of wrap up with. The first part is, please have a plan B ready for the holiday season. May seem very basic, Aaron, but when you have such a high level of uncertainty and unpredictability, just having a plan A will not suffice. So having a plan B ready for the holiday season is absolutely critical. So when I say plan B, I am talking about, again, that same scenario where I think being conservative is the most obvious choice, right? But are you likely to sacrifice some of your market share by being overtly conservative? Wouldn't it really make more sense to really build or collaborate with a real-time data system to really keep a closer tab on your consumer changing preferences and the trends and the actual e-commerce metrics, and really being nimble enough to maximize and take advantage of these time-bound opportunities that may really emerge through this entire process? So this holiday season, if there is one thing which I can absolutely state with a fair amount of confidence, Aaron, that would be that unlike other holiday season, this holiday season would be won, and I'm using the word won, by marketers who are more data-driven and who are more nimble to really maximize these short-term windows of opportunity to slowly aggregate market share away, essentially. So that would be my thing. So it would not be one consistent same strategy across for the next, 3 or 4 months. It would be instead blocks of time, maybe about, 1 week to 2 week blocks of time, which would really decide as to how successful on an aggregate level, let us say when you take the next 4 months or 3 months, you would really be. And for that, just having a plan A and just diving deep and being very rigid enough to stick to only one plan will definitely not suffice. So that would be my first recommendation, again, being.
And the next few we might have to speed through. If you said they're 5, just because we got about 2 minutes left.
Yes,
anybody you want to
go through it.
And anybody really quick, anybody wants a follow-up conversation, with Udayan and the team over there, they're awesome. They're great friends, partners. They're working with a ton of brands in the network. If you're looking for any kind of additional help here, any way whatsoever, highly encourage you to reach out to Udayan and the team at NetElixir. They're awesome. If you want to chat with me, you have need other service providers, chat digital strategy, wonder what's going on with retail media, shoot me an email as well, Aaron, AARON at BWGconnect.com. I'll put that in the chat there. But yeah, Udayan, do you want to jump through?
Yeah, I thought to quickly brief. So I thought to also put my email address, Aaron, as well.
Okay,
just in case someone wants to reach out and have a deeper discussion. We are extremely data driven. So an initial warning, I mean, as if you have not really understood by now. So I think everything is about data and numbers. So I'm happy to really have an individual conversation with all of you. The second one, just quickly going through, is building an in-house experimentation and insights lab. I mean, the only way of figuring out as to what would work in future is just fail faster. You really have to keep on going constantly and figuring out. And it's almost like a certain chunk of your budget, maybe about 7 to 8%, should be only focused on conducting a series of continuous experiments. The third one, which I wanted to highlight, essentially is you really have to understand the shoppers a lot more compared to probably what you are understanding now. And I would also call out the importance of understanding the higher value shoppers as well, because it's our firm belief that over at least the next few years, the businesses which will really win big time would really not be chasing all the shoppers. They would be chasing the higher value shoppers who have a higher impact on their overall business success. The fourth one is establishing a resiliency plan, because the entire system, your entire operating model, probably the entire business model has gone through multiple changes. And we have seen very clearly the pandemic has now become more of an endemic phase now as such, right? I mean, it's not really going to go away. The lives have to adjust around a lower threat, thankfully, COVID really persisting for a long time. So essentially, I think it's extremely important for you to really have that level of responsiveness, which is driven by a reliance on actual real-time data and really building an overall collaborative ecosystem of partners and service providers. And last but not the least, be ready for the cookieless world. I mean, we have talked a little bit about it. I mean, I'm happy to discuss at length with any one of you separately on a one-on-one basis as well. And I think it's high time that every marketer really needs to think about the cookieless world and plan for that. Understand what channels would you really want to own your presence in, and what are the channels do you really want to not be a part of? And do you really need to build your own retail media network? What are the other options available? In fact, we feel so passionately about this entire topic, Aaron. We have a site, a separate section on our site dedicated only to something called a cookieless corner, whereby we are constantly, our analytics team is constantly updating the latest thought leadership articles, insights, and some of the trends that we are seeing in the cookieless corner as well. So feel free to use that link. We can sort of share that link separately via an email with all of you as well. But this is one of the trends I would definitely request all of you to be mindful of. That's what I had in the presentation.
Yeah.
Sorry for, again, overstepping on the time limit, but
no, that's fine. I mean, I think, we kind of tackled a few things along the way as well. And I was jumping in with some top things that I'm hearing from brands as a whole. But I think, Dan, again, you're a great friend, partner, supporter of the network. So thanks so much for your time today. Looking forward to setting up a podcast with you. Everybody, thanks for joining across the board. Just great participation. Thank you so much. Hope everybody has a fantastic Tuesday, a great rest of the week. If you'd like to have a conversation, reach out. More than happy to have a conversation with you or put you in touch with Udayan and the team at NetElixir. With that, we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks again, team. Look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks a lot, Aaron. Thanks a lot.